Picture this scenario. The same boardroom that approves a $1 million Celebrate Diversity campaign is simultaneously implementing software that standardizes hiring processes across 47 countries. Welcome back to the diversity paradox, where we follow the money trail to understand capitalism's most fascinating contradiction. The numbers tell us a clear story. Companies with above-average leadership diversity generate 45% of their revenue from innovation. Companies with below-average diversity, just 26%. Yet these same organizations implement standardization practices that reduce operational costs by up to 30%. The economic engine of globalization has created perhaps the most visible and profitable contradiction in our diversity story. Our mission today is to dive into the profit paradox. This is where diversity drives innovation, but standardization maximizes shareholder returns. We'll examine how institutional standardization systematically undermines cultural integrity despite corporate pledges to the contrary. And we'll uncover what I call the corporate diversity shell game. This is where appearance and reality diverge so dramatically that even well-meaning executives get caught in the performance. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why market forces don't just accidentally create bias toward diversity theater. They systematically reward it. This isn't about corporate hypocrisy. It's about economic inevitability. Let's start with what I call the fundamental economic contradiction of our time, the profit paradox. The math is undeniable. Companies in the top quartile for both gender and ethnic diversity on executive teams are 9% more likely to outperform their peers financially. This isn't feel-good corporate speak. It's cold, hard accounting. Put simply, diverse leadership teams literally deliver better financial results. Research consistently demonstrates a clear pattern. Diverse teams produce higher innovation revenue and capture new markets at rates that should make any CFO pay attention. When you're developing products or expanding into unfamiliar territories, diversity translates directly to competitive advantage. The business case for diversity isn't just rhetoric. It's mathematical reality that shows up in quarterly earnings. But here's where the paradox bites. Standardization delivers equally compelling financial benefits, often with more immediate returns. When utility companies standardized their procurement processes and reduced glove selections from 46 styles to just 11, they achieved approximately 30% cost reductions. These efficiency gains aren't theoretical. They're line items on profit and loss statements. The mathematics of global supply chains create overwhelming pressure toward uniform products, processes, and yes, workforce skills. Scale economics favor standardization with exponential returns that often dwarf diversity's innovation advantages. It's not personal preference driving these decisions. It's spreadsheet logic. This creates our central economic paradox. Diversity drives innovation, but standardization maximizes profit. And when they conflict, guess which wins? Companies genuinely value diversity for creative problem-solving during research and development phases. Then they systematically eliminate it during scaling and optimization phases. Put simply, they embrace diversity when creating, then eliminate it when scaling. The quarterly earnings cycle means short-term standardization benefits consistently outweigh long-term innovation advantages. From a behavioral standpoint, this isn't about bad intentions. It's about structural incentives. The market rewards companies that can celebrate diversity in their marketing while implementing standardization in their operations. Welcome to capitalism's most elegant contradiction. Walk into any KFC from Manila to Mumbai, and you'll encounter identical training protocols, uniform service standards, and precisely timed operational systems. The efficiency is remarkable and remarkably uniform. Yet KFC China's market dominance is largely attributed to its localized menu strategy. They continuously develop items that reflect regional food culture and preferences. This isn't just about adding a few local dishes to appease customers. It's about understanding that successful global brands must simultaneously standardize operations while appearing to localize products. European fast food chains demonstrate this pattern consistently. They offer customized menus that seem culturally authentic. These are built on identical supply chain management and service protocols. The numbers reveal the economic logic behind this apparent contradiction. While marketing departments emphasize cultural adaptation and regional authenticity, operational systems remain remarkably standardized. Research on Southeast Asian quick-service restaurants shows how standardized supply chains actually enable the localized product offerings that consumers interpret as cultural sensitivity. This isn't deception, it's operational necessity. The economics of scale demand standardized infrastructure to support the surface-level customization that satisfies consumer demand for local authenticity. Meanwhile, this maintains the efficiency that makes global operations profitable. This pattern represents the rational corporate response to contradictory market demands. Consumers want authentic local experiences, but shareholders demand operational efficiency. The economic system rewards companies that can engineer standardization while marketing authenticity. Notice the elegant solution. Standardize everything consumers can't see, customize everything they can. Companies invest heavily in marketing localization while systematically implementing operational standardization. It's a perfect microcosm of our broader diversity paradox. Economic incentives reward the appearance of difference while systematically eliminating its substance. Let's examine how global economic integration affects institutional diversity at the national level. Countries with Anglo-Saxon cultural backgrounds and robust legal enforcement systems demonstrate higher rates of international financial reporting standards adoption. This creates improved transparency and investor protection. These are undeniably beneficial outcomes. But here's the fascinating contradiction. The same standards that enhance economic efficiency also systematically reduce institutional diversity. Standardized governance frameworks often require practices that directly contradict local traditions, cultural norms, and established ways of conducting business. Economic integration demands institutional homogenization. Cultural resistance to institutional standardization reveals deeper contradictions than simple reluctance to change. Libya's experience with international standards on auditing demonstrates how cultural factors create genuine barriers to standard adoption. These include collectivism, kinship relationships, and traditional nepotism. The country's high uncertainty avoidance characteristics should theoretically favor strict regulations, but they actually conflict with international standards requiring professional independence and transparency. These aren't just procedural differences. They represent fundamental value systems that prioritize collective relationships over individual professional autonomy. This creates what economists call the institutional trilemma. Economic integration, cultural preservation, and regulatory standardization cannot all be fully achieved simultaneously. Countries seeking global market access face inexorable pressure toward institutional standardization. This undermines distinctive governance traditions. The pattern reveals how markets ostensibly promoting choice systematically eliminate institutional alternatives. They do this through economic pressure rather than direct mandate. Integration enables global participation while constraining the very institutional diversity that might offer alternative approaches to economic organization. It's choice through elimination of choices. Meet Maria, though her name has been changed. She's a traditional textile artisan from the Nongla community in northeastern India. For generations, her family has produced hand-woven fabrics using techniques passed down through oral tradition. They use natural dyes requiring months of preparation and sustainable practices that reflect deep environmental knowledge. When Maria began selling online, the appeal lay precisely in this distinctiveness. Her textiles embodied traditional knowledge and reflected production methods completely different from mass-manufactured alternatives. Research shows that sustaining traditional textile art requires balancing internal factors like cultural inheritance. This must be weighed against external pressures, including economic necessity and market demands. When global fashion platforms discovered Maria's work, the marketing still featured her traditional story. It included photographs of her at the loom. Yet behind the scenes, production requirements systematically modified her methods. Traditional dyes requiring seasonal preparation were replaced with commercial alternatives. These offered consistent colors and faster turnaround times. Local materials, previously gathered according to traditional knowledge about optimal harvesting times, were replaced with globally sourced fibers. These offered cost savings and reliable supply. The result? Indigenous crafts now account for 5 to 10% of the global fashion market, but artisans typically receive less than 20% of the retail price. While marketing emphasized preserving cultural traditions, economic logic systematically eliminated the very authenticity being marketed. The Sabinan people in the Philippines demonstrate how commodification of indigenous clothing alters its ethno-symbolism. This impacts cultural identity in ways that extend far beyond traditional community boundaries. This pattern reflects a broader challenge. The economic machinery that makes traditional crafts globally accessible also systematically converts actual cultural diversity into standardized symbols of diversity. Maria's textiles still look distinctive, but they're increasingly produced through methods indistinguishable from mass manufacturing. It's authenticity as performance, not practice. Let's examine another fascinating economic contradiction: the commodification paradox. Markets demonstrate remarkable ability to extract value from cultural differences while simultaneously draining those differences of the very distinctiveness that created their value in the first place. The global fashion industry routinely discovers indigenous textile traditions. They transform them into marketable commodities and then optimize production to meet global demand. This process systematically eliminates the cultural contexts, traditional knowledge systems, and production methods that created the original distinctiveness. It's value extraction through authenticity destruction. The commodification of indigenous cultures reveals stark economic realities about how markets process difference. Traditional crafts requiring months of preparation become mass-produced items. These are designed to mimic regional distinctiveness while fitting global supply chain requirements. Increasing commodification threatens traditional, eco-friendly methods while creating economic opportunities for artisan communities. This creates the fundamental tension. Economic participation requires cultural modification that undermines the very traditions being celebrated. Communities face impossible choices: maintain cultural integrity and remain economically marginalized, or adapt to market demands and lose cultural distinctiveness. The commodification process creates a self-defeating economic loop. Cultural distinctiveness creates market value precisely because it differs from standardized alternatives. Market value creates incentives for scaled production, which necessarily eliminates the distinctive production methods that created the original value. In essence, success destroys the very thing that created success. Companies then invest heavily in marketing the appearance of distinctiveness to maintain premium pricing despite standardized production. Economists call this simulacra consumption. Consumers purchase symbols of difference rather than actual difference. The economic machinery systematically converts genuine cultural diversity into marketable representations of diversity. Financial markets create perhaps the most powerful and paradoxical economic force affecting diversity. ESG investing has experienced explosive growth. Environmental, social, and governance investing now represents global sustainable investment assets reaching $35.3 trillion. This represents 36% of all professionally managed assets. Additionally, 98% of surveyed investors now assess ESG performance. 72% conduct structured reviews compared to just 32% in previous surveys. This represents genuine market pressure for diversity performance improvement. When trillions of dollars evaluate companies based on diversity metrics, executives pay attention. Yet simultaneously, these same capital markets create overwhelming pressure for quarterly performance predictability. This systematically favors standardization over the operational variance that meaningful diversity creates. ESG integration became the most common sustainable investment strategy, particularly in markets like Japan, where it overtook traditional corporate engagement approaches. This creates direct market incentive to standardize ESG metrics and reporting processes. The result is reduced variance in how organizations approach diversity initiatives. The market rewards predictable diversity performance rather than innovative approaches that might produce better results, but create reporting complexity. This contradiction explains why companies often pursue what appears to be diversity theater rather than substantive transformation. The market simultaneously rewards visible diversity metrics, particularly in public-facing ESG communications. Meanwhile, it punishes the operational unpredictability that meaningful diversity implementation creates. Financial analysis reveals a troubling pattern. Organizations investing in visible diversity metrics while maintaining operational standardization often outperform those genuinely embracing operational diversity. The market has created systematic incentives for the appearance rather than the reality of diversity. This happens not through conspiracy, but through the logical operation of capital allocation mechanisms. Now let's examine what I call the corporate diversity shell game. This is the systematic gap between diversity investment and leadership representation. Despite unprecedented spending on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, significant underrepresentation persists across sectors. This should make us question what's actually happening with all that money. In specialized fields like hand surgery, women hold only 13.6% of leadership positions. In U.S. academic dentistry, the male-to-female dean ratio remains approximately 5-to-1. These statistics aren't improving despite massive corporate investments in diversity initiatives. Where's the disconnect? The pattern becomes clearer when examining program effectiveness. Leadership education in advancing diversity programs demonstrates statistically significant improvement in participant self-efficacy across learning objectives. People feel more confident, more empowered, more capable after completing these programs. However, the translation from improved self-efficacy to actual leadership advancement remains frustratingly inconsistent. Programs successfully change individual attitudes and confidence levels, but show limited impact on systemic representation. The machinery of advancement remains largely unchanged. This includes promotion criteria, network effects, and sponsorship patterns. The most revealing pattern emerges in resource allocation within diversity initiatives. Organizations typically invest heavily in visible activities. These include communications, training sessions, and recruitment campaigns. Meanwhile, they allocate minimal resources to structural changes that would address root causes of underrepresentation. This spending pattern reflects rational economic calculation. The financial returns on appearing diverse systematically outweigh the returns on becoming diverse. These include brand perception, marketing advantages, and ESG ratings. Innovation benefits are offset by standardization pressures and implementation costs. It's not hypocrisy. It's economically rational behavior responding to market incentives. Let's examine our final economic contradiction: how global trade simultaneously enables and undermines cultural diversity. The European Union's cultural goods exports reached €26 billion in 2023. This represents a 25.8% increase since 2018. This suggests markets increasingly value cultural diversity and create economic opportunities for distinctive traditions. Cultural goods now represent a significant portion of international trade. This enables cultural producers to access global audiences that would have been impossible in pre-globalization markets. Digital platforms have democratized access to global markets in ways that should theoretically support cultural diversity. Yet economic analysis reveals that globalization of cultural markets creates systematic pressure toward what economists call optimal distinctiveness. Cultural products must be distinctive enough to be marketable, but standardized enough for global distribution systems. Thai TikTok creators demonstrate this tension perfectly. They employ multilingual content strategies and visual storytelling techniques to enhance global reach while attempting to maintain cultural authenticity. However, they face increasing challenges. These include linguistic accuracy requirements and pressure to adapt content to platform algorithms that favor standardized engagement patterns over cultural specificity. The resulting pattern reveals globalization's fundamental contradiction. Increased trade creates more cultural products crossing borders while systematically rewarding those that adapt to standardized formats. The EU's cultural trade balance declined from €3.4 billion in 2018 to €1.3 billion in 2023. This suggests increasing competition from standardized cultural products. This creates the paradoxical situation where globalization simultaneously increases the visibility of cultural diversity while systematically standardizing its forms. More cultural products reach global audiences, but they increasingly resemble each other in structure, format, and approach. It's diversity through convergence. Different content, identical packaging. Let's synthesize what we've discovered about the economic dimensions of the diversity paradox. The profit paradox creates systematic contradictions in global markets. The same economic forces that reward diversity during innovation phases systematically eliminate it during scaling phases. Companies in the top quartile for diversity outperform financially by 9%. Diverse leadership generates 45% more innovation revenue. Yet standardization simultaneously reduces costs by 30%. This creates rational economic incentives to celebrate diversity while implementing standardization. This isn't corporate hypocrisy. It's structural economic logic. The gap between diversity rhetoric and reality reflects economic mechanisms, not moral failures. Despite ESG investing reaching $35.3 trillion and 98% of investors assessing diversity performance, leadership representation remains disproportionately low. Women hold only 13.6% of leadership positions in specialized fields despite massive program investments. This pattern emerges because markets consistently reward the appearance of diversity more than structural transformation. ESG metrics favor visible, measurable activities over systemic changes. These systemic changes would address root causes but create operational complexity and reporting challenges. Global markets simultaneously enable and constrain cultural diversity through economic mechanisms that favor optimal distinctiveness over authentic difference. EU cultural exports increased 25.8%, while cultural trade balance declined from €3.4 billion to €1.3 billion. This reveals the standardization pressure affecting even cultural products. Understanding these economic contradictions helps explain why well-intentioned diversity efforts consistently produce paradoxical results. The problem isn't bad faith or incompetence. It's structural incentives that systematically reward diversity's appearance while undermining its substance through perfectly rational economic mechanisms. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of capitalism's most elegant contradiction. I hope these insights help you recognize the economic patterns operating around you. From companies celebrating diversity while standardizing operations to cultural products marketed as authentic while being systematically optimized for global distribution. Understanding these mechanisms allows us to move beyond simplistic explanations that blame either malicious intent or organizational incompetence. Instead, we can address the structural incentives that create these paradoxical patterns. This requires awareness of how economic systems actually operate versus how we think they should operate. Next time on the diversity paradox, we'll examine how organizations attempt to navigate these economic tensions through diversity management initiatives. This creates entirely new paradoxes in the process. We'll explore the management contradiction, where formal diversity programs fail to achieve stated goals despite genuine commitment and substantial investment. We'll investigate the inclusion paradox that requires simultaneously emphasizing and de-emphasizing differences. And we'll examine the metrics trap that often undermines the very diversity it attempts to measure and reward. Until then, here's a question to ponder. When you encounter products or services marketed as culturally authentic or diverse, how often do you investigate the economic systems producing them? What would genuine economic support for diversity actually look like in practice? Command, this is Kaede briefing concluded. Episode 3 file closed. No hostiles detected. Eyes still watching. Out.